This podcast is part of the C-Suite Radio Network, turning the volume up on business.
Welcome to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us as Deb talks with her guests, experts in their fields, as they share real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most successful businesses, how it got to be that way, and more importantly, how any of us can use the principles that were used in building this business to make our own businesses successful. And so please join me in welcoming Steve Anderson to our program today. Welcome, Steve.
Deb, what a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to have so much fun. And this is such an interesting topic to me because it really is fascinating how a company got to be so huge in such a relatively short period of time. And of course, the company that we're talking about is Amazon. But let me tell people just a little bit more about you, and then we'll really jump into this. So as I said, today's guest is Steve Anderson, who has spent over 35 years shaping the insurance industry through a deeper understanding of emerging technologies and how businesses today can best integrate and leverage them. Steve is a sought-after speaker and influencer. He is also the author of the widely anticipated book, The Bezos Letters, where he reveals 14 principles for business growth based on the ideas and patterns that emerged when he examined Jeff Bezos' 21 annual letters to Amazon shareholders. Steve is here today to share some of the key insights that he discovered. So again, Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, first let's go back to this. Why did you decide that this was what you wanted to write a book about?
Well, it is a bit of a story because actually it's been a 3+ year process. A little over 3 years ago, I had this idea because I've worked in the insurance industry and certainly helped businesses with their insurance program, mitigating risk, providing coverage if something does happen. Auto accident, employee gets injured, any of those types of kind of normal things.
Right.
And the industry is very risk averse, right? Because everybody in the industry sees all the bad things that can happen and
those cost money.
Those cost money, exactly. And so what I started looking at, though, was this interplay with emerging new technologies, be it, machine learning or drones or 3D printing or all kinds of different things, as well as some of the things, normal things like social media and all of those kinds of things and how they can use it. So I was looking at it from two lenses. One is helping the organization operationally, internally, how can they be more efficient? But I was also looking at it from how can they help advise their clients better? And I came across this thought and kind of developed over a bit of time that the biggest risk a business faces might actually be not taking enough risk.
Right.
And so the original book idea was called The Risk Dilemma. Right? How do you balance those two thoughts and ideas? And I started researching and I was looking at companies who had managed well that changing technology landscape and those that didn't. And some of those are very familiar today. BlackBerry, Kodak. Kodak's kind of, kind of the one held up for how not to do.
Right.
Sears most recently. So I was researching those. And then what are the companies that actually have done it well? And came across Amazon as literally one of the most inventive and innovative companies that's out there today and has been for quite some time. That research led me to the shareholder letters. And, a lot of public companies write shareholder letters. Very few of them are interesting.
Right. Usually it's we did this, we did that, we made you money.
Here's all our great stuff. Here's all of the things that we did wonderfully. And I started reading a couple letters and I realized that Bezos actually, when I read through all letters as a single narrative, not just individual years, I realized Bezos had laid out what I call hidden in plain sight,
Mm.
his plan for
Mhm.
growing Amazon.
Mhm.
And as I started researching that and the letters and what he said, that's where the principles emerged out
Mhm.
of. And I realized there's some really good information that
Mhm.
he's sharing that can apply to any business,
Mhm.
whether you're a solopreneur just starting out, whether you're a large corporation with
Mhm.
hundreds or thousands of employees. The question I started asking is, how did he do it?
Mhm.
And aren't you curious as a business owner how Amazon did
Right.
it?
Mhm.
So that was the genesis for the letters. And
Mhm.
actually the book started as a white paper
Mm.
because I thought, okay,
Mhm.
I did an executive summary of each
Mhm.
letter, kind of single page, key
Mhm.
points, key ideas, and had some publishing friends. Actually, my wife is the co-author of the
Mm.
book.
Mhm.
She's been in the book publishing business for many, many years, and showed it to her and actually the founder of Morgan James Publishing, who ended up publishing the book. And they both came back very quickly and said, this is not a white paper, this is a book.
Right.
And so that then led to the deep research
Mhm.
and what ultimately actually was published just a couple weeks ago as the Bezos letters.
Right.
So yeah, big background.
Mhm. Now, you did this based on public information. You didn't
Correct.
have access to anybody. You certainly didn't interview Mr. Bezos.
I did not. I did interview a few people that I was
Okay.
able to connect with that had worked at
Mhm.
Amazon,
Mhm.
but I'm taking my view is as an outsider, not an
Right.
insider,
Mhm.
right? So what can any
Mhm.
business look at
Mhm.
and get out of these letters? So
Right.
that was what I was trying to do.
Mhm. Well, and one of the things that is rather unique about him is he has been very public with saying, this is what we have done. I'm sure that there are, plenty of things that, that have stayed behind closed doors.
Oh yes.
But, the interesting thing is his mistakes he has also put out there.
Hmm.
And that's that is of course one of the premises of the book and one of the principles, but it is, it's interesting that it is out there now. When was Amazon founded? I mean, in many ways it seems like it was 2 or 3 years ago. Other it's like 50 years ago. When exactly was Amazon founded?
So it's 25 years old this year. So it was
Wow.
actually started in 1995.
Hmm.
And again, we can talk
In the
about how that,
garage. I love all
well,
these big companies
and
that start in the
actually,
garage.
interestingly enough, so Bezos and Mackenzie, his wife
Hmm.
at the time,
Hmm.
moved from New York City out to Seattle,
Hmm.
and they rented a house, and he rented a house that had a garage
Hmm.
because he thought that mystique
Right.
was worth having. So they
Mhm.
literally did start in the
Mhm.
garage. They moved out of that fairly
Mhm.
rapidly.
Right, they
But it
outgrew
was,
it. Mhm.
yeah, they outgrew it. But 1995, officially
Mhm.
94, he started kind of putting stuff
Mhm.
together. And then their IPO, they went public in
Mhm.
1997. So
Okay.
1997 is the first
Mhm.
letter to shareholders
Right.
that he wrote. And
Mhm.
yeah, very interesting letter that we can
Mhm.
talk about, kind of the foundational
Mhm.
letter. And again, interesting to me, like you said, he, he, he's been very open.
Mhm.
Now, again, you're right. There's stuff that he keeps
Right.
close
Mhm.
to the vest, but
And some other things that he would have liked to.
yes, that may be
You mentioned
true.
his former wife. We won't
Yes,
go there.
yes. Well, again, that's yes, that's a topic,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I mean, that was
Mhm.
one of the things that really caught my attention,
Mhm.
and I do hope to meet him,
Mhm.
and I do have a couple questions for him.
Mhm.
One of them is why?
Right.
Why did he? I don't know if he felt compelled. I
Mhm.
don't know if he just is that
Mhm.
open-minded. But that's an interesting question to
Mhm.
me because
Right.
that's not there. Like I said, there are a
Mhm.
handful. I would say the
Mhm.
other one I point to is Warren Buffett,
Mhm.
right? So people wait for Buffett's
Right.
letter to come
Mhm.
out. And I think we will look at Bezos. Again, Buffett's
Mhm.
had 40 years,
Right.
maybe
Mhm.
in a number of other
Mhm.
years, people will really look at these letters as a whole narrative.
Mhm. Right. And of course, the interesting thing about Amazon was, or is, because it's only 25 years old, all of the technology, it existed in many cases, and they have grown with it. They have really embraced it far more than, especially companies that are the old guard companies.
Right.
You mentioned Kodak. They went digital cameras, really? Nah.
Yeah.
Certainly people aren't going to use a phone to take pictures. And companies that just really didn't believe that technology was going to change the way that we live and do business. And Amazon, that was just part of who they were.
Right.
But one of the things that I've always wondered is, okay, he started in a garage selling books.
Hmm.
Did he, do you think that he had this huge vision in his head, or has it just kind of evolved through time?
I actually think he had a vision. I would be surprised if he envisioned where they are today.
Right. Hmm.
But he, from the very beginning, had
Hmm.
a vision for more than just books.
Right.
And in fact, he didn't pick books because he liked books.
Hmm.
He picked books to start with
Hmm.
because one book is exactly like another book,
Right.
right? And he realized, and he actually made a list of about
Hmm.
20 different products
Hmm.
that could be sold
Hmm.
on the internet.
Hmm.
And he ended up with books because he could have an inventory of
Hmm.
1 million books
Hmm.
when the very largest bookstore at the time had 100 to
Right.
150,000 books.
Hmm.
And there, there's no
Hmm.
differentiation between books.
Hmm.
So if somebody could buy it less expensively, they
Hmm.
likely would.
Right.
But he had from the very beginning in mind that he would go to music or videos
Hmm.
or write a whole host of
Hmm.
products that are easily sold and shipped,
Hmm.
right? So that was a key criteria
Right.
also. And we
Yeah.
did it
And a
to
book is probably one of the
and
easiest things to
easy
ship.
to put it in an
Hmm.
envelope and
Hmm.
off it goes.
Right. And of course, what he really was instrumental in doing was the whole online selling.
Yes.
He clearly has to have a physical location, and or multiple ones, as is the case. But it only has been fairly recently where people went into in anything. And so, you didn't go to Amazon to a brick and mortar store. It was online,
Right.
and I think that's, one of the companies you mentioned is Sears. Sears didn't figure out, hey, people they want the ease. They don't want to have to go somewhere. They want to be able to, not everybody lives in a city with a store just down the street, and so, Bezos figured out, that it has to be online if you want to be successful.
And I think that's where he had an early vision. The thing that really captured his attention. So he worked in New York City at
Hmm.
a venture capital
Hmm.
fund. Can't remember the exact name of it right now, but and he did research on this thing called the
Hmm.
internet. Again, this is probably 94, right? So
Right.
really early on.
And we certainly didn't do e-commerce. I mean,
We
that's the
certainly didn't
biggie.
do
Hmm.
e-commerce. Yeah, absolutely. And he came across this statistic that the internet usage was growing at 2,300% per year.
Wow.
Um, and his comment was, that just doesn't happen in business very
Hmm.
often, right? And that exponential kind of
Hmm.
growth. And so we started thinking, what business model would make sense
Hmm.
on the internet?
Right.
And that's the base idea that he started
Hmm.
developing. And you're right, they actually moved to Seattle for two reasons. One, Microsoft was there, and
Right.
he knew he needed programmers.
Hmm.
So where is the
Yeah.
best place to
Yeah.
get
You go to the
programmers? When you
tech hub.
go to the
Hmm.
tech hub at the
Hmm.
time. And the second reason was because he started with books, two of the largest book distributors had warehouses
Hmm.
within an easy drive.
Hmm.
Ingram, which is
Hmm.
still around, and then
Hmm.
Baker and Taylor, which actually just a few months ago closed their retail
Yeah.
operation.
Hmm.
But he was able to take an online order,
Hmm.
go to the warehouse and pick up the book,
Hmm.
bring it back, package it, and drive it to the
Right.
post office. So that's why Seattle
Hmm.
became the hub. And as you said, they built physical locations, but they were fulfillment centers.
Hmm.
So they automated right all of that. And
Right.
and actually, I've had the opportunity to tour two different
Hmm.
fulfillment centers. and anybody listening, it highly recommended that you tour a fulfillment
Mhm.
center. There are actually a large number of them across the U.S.
Mhm.
I don't know about overseas, but I know in the U.S. you can go online, Amazon.com/FCs for fulfillment center
Mhm.
tours, and actually schedule one.
Oh,
And it's really
cool.
fascinating to
Mhm.
see what happens when
Mhm.
you click buy
Right.
till it shows up at your
Mhm.
front door.
Mhm. Well, yeah, because it is in many cases, which is part of the reason we love it, such a quick process.
Yes.
It was funny, we are having an event this weekend, and so on Thursday night, I'm on Amazon store, looking, and for something I specifically needed, and of course I'm, going, where can can I get it next day? Now I'm in Atlanta, we
Hmm.
have big fulfillment centers here, so many things we can get next day.
Hmm.
But the item that I needed, because it's a summer item, they've downsized a bit on those, just
Yep.
like any other type of retail business. They're
Yep.
transitioning into the next season. And so I couldn't get the item until Saturday by 9 p.m. Well, the event is Saturday at 6. So I might actually have to go to
Go
a
to a
physical
store.
store. But that is, that is probably for me one of the biggest draws with Amazon,
Hmm.
is I can buy it at a reasonable cost. Now, granted, you
Yes.
might be paying a little bit of a premium, but I'm not having my time, my gas, all of those various things going to all these places. I can just go boom, boom, boom and buy it.
Yeah.
Um, and to think about, how somebody 25 years ago would even think people will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that was the mecca
Well,
of shopping malls and the big box stores and,
yep.
and to think, well, people are going to give that up.
And I think again, one of the things that Bezos is really good at is experimenting
Right.
and testing.
Hmm.
And so, he started out small,
Hmm.
but he kept testing.
Hmm.
And they are so good at invention and innovation. So when I ask people, why do you shop on Amazon? Well, pretty much what you
Hmm.
said. And the theme that comes back is it's just easy.
Hmm.
Well, that's extremely intentional
Hmm.
in terms of how they have built and developed
Right.
what they do and
Hmm.
how they do it. I want to go back to Sears, if I might, for a
Hmm.
moment, because I think what's interesting to think about Sears is they were the original catalog company,
Right.
right? They, I
Yeah.
put in quotes online, right?
Uh-huh.
But they were, you got the big Sears
Hmm.
catalog. You could buy anything and
Hmm.
everything. You could
You
buy
ripped out the page
houses.
for
Yeah,
Christmas and said, "This is what I want." Yeah.
that's
Hmm.
what I want. Yeah. And so they successfully made the transition from catalog to retail.
Right.
But as you said, people's expectations of retail have
Hmm.
changed over the
Hmm.
last 10, whatever, 15 years,
Hmm.
and they weren't able to make that transition.
Hmm.
And I think that's a large reason, why they're in the situation
Hmm.
they are now. But then look at Kohl's. So Kohl's
Right.
department store,
Hmm.
their foot traffic has been down for several
Hmm.
years. The younger people just aren't walking into a Kohl's that
Right.
often,
Hmm.
right? Because again, online.
Hmm.
So what did Kohl's do?
They partnered with Amazon.
To take returns.
Hmm.
And I haven't done it yet myself, but I've talked to several
Hmm.
people that have taken their
Oh,
returns to Kohl's,
it's fabulous.
and they get a 25%
Yep.
coupon discount
Oh,
for
right.
any
Yeah.
item in the
Hmm.
store.
Yep.
In
Hmm.
2009, their retail sales and foot traffic have
Hmm.
increased about
Yep.
25%.
Yeah.
So again, that's thinking differently
Hmm.
about how do we attract and engage with today's
Right.
consumer in
Hmm.
in what they want.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think those are really
Hmm.
interesting examples
Hmm.
of what might be
Hmm.
possible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Kohl's. I took 2 items back last week and was, just chatting with the associate as she was doing the paperwork on them, because they were 2 separate orders that I had done.
Hmm.
And so, it took a little bit longer. And I said, so how many of the people that return an item walk out the door or walk in the store? And she said they walk in the store.
Yeah, because they haven't been in it for a while.
Well, yeah.
or
And
as
you know,
long
and
as I'm here.
here's my coupons. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's
there it
yeah.
is.
See, look,
25% off.
Yeah,
Yep, there it is.
and it's only good in the store. See,
Yes.
and that was the catch because I brought it home. I was in a hurry, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to go home, and I went, oh, it's
Oh.
only good in the store.
Yes.
But yeah.
And so what's the lesson? For
Mhm.
me, the lesson is any business can compete against Amazon,
Mhm.
and Amazon certainly has been accused of, right, putting retail out of
Mhm.
business and, right, all of those, and
Right.
bookstores, all of those kinds of things. And they adapt quickly.
Mhm.
As a business owner, you
Right.
need to be
Mhm.
thinking, how do I
Yes.
adapt quickly
Mhm.
to what the
Mhm.
consumer wants?
Mhm.
And for Amazon, that's a core value,
Mhm.
is what does the consumer
Mhm.
want?
Right. Status quo does not exist for Amazon.
No.
And I think you're right. That is probably one of the biggest things that whether you're, a business that's operating out of your guest bedroom or Amazon, you can't be happy with status quo.
Yeah.
What's going to happen tomorrow? And you had darn well better at least be thinking about it.
Right. Well, and we can talk about all of this, but Amazon Marketplace,
Mhm.
which today represents, according to
Right.
Bezos in the
Mhm.
2018 shareholder letter, 58% of
Right.
all products sold on Amazon.com
Right.
come from third-party
Mhm.
sellers, not from Amazon.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. For them
Now,
to think, hey, let's open up our business to other,
it's
you know,
crazy.
yeah. Now, granted, they're taking a cut.
They are.
And they have some pretty strict rules,
And I
because
think,
yeah, that's
I was
the
just say,
key.
that's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
key if you're going to be successful in the marketplace,
Mhm.
is you better
Mhm.
understand Amazon's obsession with
Mhm.
customers.
Right.
And you better treat their
Mhm.
customers, because they are their customers
Mhm.
that you get access
Right.
to, as they will,
Mhm.
or you're gone.
Mhm.
And, lots of complaints I hear from third-party sellers. Oh, I got cut off, no
Mhm.
notice, no. And I want to have a conversation. Why?
Mhm.
There's a reason. They're not
Right.
capricious.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
customer problems
Mhm.
did you not
Right.
address?
Yeah.
Uh,
And because I think most people, and this is, just purely a guess on my part, do not realize they're not buying from Amazon.
I
So
absolutely
Amazon is
agree.
protecting their brand. And so
Hmm.
if they have, a seller who is consistently getting bad reviews, lots of returns, all of those things, it's not, well, Bob Smith's company on Amazon is doing this. It's Amazon
It's
is
Amazon.
selling a product that is bad.
Yep,
And so, yeah, you're gone. And,
you're gone.
and the cool thing is if you're a third party vendor, this. I mean, you sign up for that. And so it's only going to benefit you. You
Right.
don't want to sell things that have issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting about Marketplace, so Marketplace, actually there were 2 iterations of Marketplace
Mhm.
before that failed miserably.
Mhm.
The first was Amazon Auctions,
Mm.
and
Like
Amazon's
eBay.
attempt, well, it
Mhm.
was their attempt to
Mhm.
compete with eBay.
Mhm.
Utter failure. Nobody, it just didn't work. Nobody
It was
thought
too
of
different.
Amazon.
Mhm.
Nobody thought of Amazon as auctions. They
Mhm.
thought of it as a place to go
Mhm.
buy something.
Right.
Interestingly, eBay then tended to go to,
Mhm.
you could do the auction, kind of their
Mhm.
traditional, but you could also buy now, right?
Right.
So they were
Mhm.
both competing with each
Mhm.
other. So that failed. They morphed that into what they called Z shops, the
Mm.
letter Z
Mhm.
shops. Z shops was a separate part of the Amazon website
Mhm.
that third-party sellers could be on,
Mhm.
but as a consumer, you had to log into a different
Ah,
part of the
well, that's
website.
not going to work.
Well, that's not going to work.
Mhm.
We know that now. At the
Mhm.
time, they were experimenting,
Mhm.
so that people didn't want to do that.
Mhm.
And that's when Bezos basically said, we need to put it on our website
Mhm.
right next to the stuff we
Mhm.
sell.
Right.
And again, it goes back to customer obsession. And
Mhm.
that's one of the principles,
Mhm.
is obsess over
Mhm.
customers. Because what Bezos said was, you know what? If the consumer can find what they're looking for from a third party, either we don't carry it yet or there's a better price,
Mhm.
that's better for the customer and ultimately will be better for Amazon
Right.
and their shareholders.
Mhm.
He had significant pushback from his senior leadership team.
Oh, I bet.
They thought this was a
Mhm.
crazy
Right.
idea.
Because they're
Nobody
only
was doing
getting
it.
a cut of. Mhm.
Right, right. and they get a percentage,
Mm-hmm.
but that has continued to grow
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and obviously now is a significant part of their revenue.
Right. Well, you mentioned at the start that you base this book on the shareholder letters,
Hmm.
and he does them different. But what started it was, of course, letter number one. So talk a little bit more about the shareholder letters, because I'm not a shareholder, so I don't get one.
Well, they're available to anybody. Actually,
Mhm,
you can go to Amazon's website, amazon.com/IR for
mhm,
investor
mhm,
relations,
right.
and they're all there,
Mhm.
and various SEC, so they're public
Right.
documents.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you could, since it's a publicly traded company and
Correct.
that's a
Yep.
public communication. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the 97 letters, the first letter,
Mm-hmm.
and they went public in 1997. The
Mm-hmm.
letters are released in the spring of the following year. So the
Right.
97 letter was released in spring, usually
Mm-hmm.
April-ish of
Right.
98,
Yeah. It
and
takes a
on
quarter
down.
to get the
Takes,
books closed,
yep,
and mhm.
exactly. And what's interesting, the 97 letter is interesting for a couple of reasons. One is he really starts out with, here's how we're going to operate
Mm-hmm.
as Amazon. And he's basically talking to investors and saying, here's what we're going to do. One of the key thoughts there is we're going to invest for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're an investor who just wants to invest for short term,
Right.
don't buy our stock
Right.
because it's
Go
probably
somewhere
not right
else.
for you. Go
Mm-hmm.
someplace else.
Yeah. There's not going to
Which,
be enough change that it's going to make a difference for you.
and again, what an interesting mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Usually startup companies, right, or this
Right.
want
Mm-hmm.
investors, want people coming in,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to do all these things. He's
Mm-hmm.
going, no,
Mm-hmm.
here's our philosophy and here's how we're going to run this company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a long-term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into a number of other areas in the letter. So that was the first letter.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting and really intriguing to me, and actually why I included that 97 letter in the book, is that every year since, he includes a copy of the 97 letter, including 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and he says something to the effect of, as is my habit,
Mm-hmm.
I'm including a copy of our original 1997
Mm-hmm.
letter, and it's always day one.
Right.
And so that's a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
concept for
Mm-hmm.
Bezos, but he continues to see that letter as a foundational piece to where Amazon started by referencing it every year, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is fascinating.
Right.
And so, I can go through the whole letter,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think we have time for all of
Well,
that. But
and it is available, as you said, online,
is
but more importantly,
available.
in your book.
Yes, it is. And what I do in the book, so as I read through the letters, I came up
Mm-hmm.
with what I call 14 growth principles.
Mm-hmm.
So in my view, from the letters, these are the key areas or key principles that I think Amazon used to
Mm-hmm.
grow that I think can apply to many businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not every principle will apply equally,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly many of them will.
Right.
And so in that 97 letter, I actually highlighted where the 14 principles are described by, and
Mm-hmm.
different terms, different,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I think the principles you can find throughout now the 21 different letters that are
Right.
available.
Well, and I love the 14 principles, and you've kind of grouped them together into
Mm-hmm.
test, build, accelerate, and scale. And it's not you have to do one then do two. I mean, companies bounce around.
Right.
Obviously depending on what's going on, all those various things. But it is interesting that it covers pretty much every gamut of business.
Yeah.
From hey, you're just starting a business to you've had a pretty well-established business. Here are some things that you need to be considering. And I love the fact that you start with the principle that there has to be successful failure.
Mm-hmm.
And those are, it's almost like those are oxymorons.
They are.
And because
you don't often hear those two words used together.
But that really is one of the foundations of Amazon. I mean, we've already mentioned two of their big failures. And of course, what they were was they led to
Yes.
marketplace. And so talk to us a little bit more about that.
So the principle is encourage successful failure. And the term successful failure actually came from, and I describe this in the chapter about that principle, from the Apollo 13 moon mission.
Mhm.
So if you remember, Apollo 13, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and we had 12 and then 13, kind of a routine mission at that point
Mhm.
until an oxygen tank
Yes.
exploded.
And then
right?
Houston, we have
And
a
Houston,
problem.
we have a problem. Exactly. Jim Lovell is commander.
Mhm.
So again, to me, fascinating story, but
Mhm.
let's fast forward. They got the astronauts back
Mhm.
alive, and in Ron Howard's movie, Apollo 13, which most people probably remember,
Right.
that did a great job explaining what happened.
Mhm.
Tom Hanks, playing Jim Lovell, the commander, is stepping off the helicopter after getting plucked out of the ocean onto the deck of the Iwo Jima, and in the background he's narrating, and he says, you know, our mission, Apollo 13, became known as NASA's most successful failure.
Right.
And that's where that phrase just resonated with me,
Mhm.
especially looking at businesses today.
Mhm.
So one of the things that's a real problem, I mentioned it early on, is the biggest risk not taking enough risk.
Right.
And how do you do that,
Mhm.
right? And so successful failure is this idea of experimenting with something new. And that's why it's in the test
Mhm.
cycle, right?
Mhm.
So you're new as a new startup or
Mhm.
even as an older company, but you're testing a new product, a new service, a new platform. So you're in the test mode,
Mhm.
even though you may be around for quite a
Mhm.
while. And at Amazon, well, here's how Bezos describes it. Experimentation is the key to invention,
Mhm.
and failure goes hand in hand.
Right.
Because if it's an experiment, you don't know whether it's going to
Right.
work or not,
And
right?
there obviously are
And,
going to be failures.
and the problem with most businesses is they punish failure,
Mhm.
meaning as an employee, yes, we want you to be innovative, but you
Right.
better be right.
Right. Yeah.
They
If
don't
you
have
cost us
room.
money.
If
Mhm.
if there isn't room for failing and learning from it. Now, I always have to say, Amazon has an intolerance for incompetence.
Right. But that's different.
That's different.
Mhm.
So it's not stupid failure. They expect every employee to bring their A game
Mhm.
every day.
Right.
And if you're not failing enough, we're not moving the needle enough.
Mhm.
And Bezos has actually said over the last couple of years, if we're not growing the size of our failures
Mhm.
as our company
Right.
grows,
Mhm.
we're not going to move the needle enough.
Mhm.
You know, and he says billion-dollar failures don't matter. Well,
Right.
you know, that's hard for
Yeah.
anybody to get their head
And
around. But
and if you're a shareholder, you're like,
oh, you're like,
whoa.
whoa, that's right. But again, long-term
Mhm.
thinking comes, and actually, Deb, that's where the principles interact with each other.
Mhm.
They kind of stand alone, but they also interact
Mhm.
with each other. So at Amazon, there is a real culture of helping employees, you know, test,
Mhm.
experiment, build. And
Right.
actually, Bezos says in one of the letters, he believes that Amazon is the best place in the world to fail
Mhm.
because of their culture there.
Mhm. Right. And
And
he
that's,
encourages every employee at every level. It doesn't
yes.
matter what it's not like they might have an R&D department,
Well,
but
we could talk about that. They have
yeah,
they
the
have a
mailroom
version of it.
people, they can come up with just as good ideas as the R&D people.
Yeah, and they're encouraged to.
Mhm.
You know, what could you do better in your job? What would
Right.
make your job
Mhm.
easier? Test it out. Tell us
Mhm.
why you think it's better.
Mhm.
Test it out with a wider group of people, and if it works, guess what? We'll expand
Right.
it out, and
Mhm.
you may lead the initiative
Mhm.
to expand it out.
Mhm.
And so that's part of how they train, you know, junior
Mhm.
executives, supervisors to come up. And
Right.
so it's an interesting mindset that I think is very different than
Mhm.
what most businesses look at.
Mhm.
And I think let's go back to Kodak a minute.
Mhm.
You know, certainly some of it was, how do we get this digital camera? I think the other part at Kodak was they were making so much money on film
Right.
and processing
Mhm.
that the digital, they couldn't get their head around a
Mhm.
business model that would make digital
Right.
work. So I don't think it was just, oh,
Mhm.
digital won't work,
Right.
but trying to create a new business model
Mhm.
around digital that didn't have the
Right.
profits around
Yeah.
film was
Well,
really
yeah,
hard.
because in essence, they were saying that it was going to replace film.
Hmm.
And yeah, and that, I mean, that was where they made obviously the vast majority of their money. And you're thinking, wait a minute, replace? No, no, we can't talk about replacing our biggest revenue.
Revenue, right. And I think that mindset is where the problem is,
Hmm.
as opposed to thinking at Amazon, what's next?
Hmm.
What do we have to prepare for that's
Hmm.
coming?
Right.
And again, they're thinking multi-year out,
Hmm.
not just next quarter.
Hmm.
And that mindset really helps in that development of new
Hmm.
ideas.
Right. And it is, I love the fact that they do encourage anybody at any level. And some of them, may have nothing, no major significance other than, hey, it makes things work better in our department. But
Hmm.
yeah, some of them have got to be these big things, and maybe, it can be anything. Maybe somebody watched a Star Wars movie and thought, yeah, what if we did, I
Right.
mean, you never know. But as you said, they encourage that. And that's, that is interesting. And as business owners, that is something that we have to be looking at all the time. What's
Yes.
going to be the next technology? I work with a lot of website developers, and there are many of them that are no longer in business because they were HTML coders, and you were
Yes.
always, always, always going to do that. And when that little thing called WordPress came along, they thought, no, this is not, it's not professional. It can't
Right.
be big enough. It can't, you still have to know HTML coding to,
Yep.
and to some degree, but, hello, I can figure it out watching YouTube. But yeah, no longer do you have, unless you're a big business, websites that are, $5,000, $10,000 or more to develop. People can do it themselves, or they can have somebody else easily do it. And
Easily
and
do
that
it.
was one of those things that people just, not only did they not anticipate it, they went, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree. Um, and we've talked about kind of invention and innovation, and
Hmm.
I use those words very specifically
Hmm.
because that's actually the third principle, is practice dynamic
Hmm.
invention and innovation.
Hmm.
And that's what we've been talking about at Amazon is
Hmm.
um, they do have a Skunk Works
Hmm.
department. Um, so I want to talk about that just a
Hmm.
second, because absolutely employees are encouraged
Hmm.
to come up with
Right.
ideas on
But you
their
do
own.
have to have people that's specifically what they
Well,
do.
and where that grew out of, it's called Lab 126,
Hmm.
and it's their hardware development lab.
Mm.
So the difference there, at least
Hmm.
for me, is hardware's a different animal.
Right.
It's hard for an employee sitting
Hmm.
somewhere to come up with a
Hmm.
hardware idea
Hmm.
and be able to do prototyping
Hmm.
and have the
Hmm.
manufacturing skill sets and those kinds of things. So Lab 126 is where the Kindle actually was originally
Hmm.
developed and released in
Hmm.
2007, I believe, to great fanfare.
Hmm.
And as Bezos said in the 2007 letter, Kindle's been very successful, and we had the audacious idea to reinvent the book.
Right.
It's been
Yeah,
around for
we're a
500 years.
bookseller, and
Yes.
mhm,
And we're going to,
mhm,
and he said it was audacious, and we
mhm,
knew we needed to come up with something that was different enough for consumers
mhm,
that it would make sense.
right.
And I think, Kindle certainly was,
Mhm,
because I actually, for a lot of books, prefer reading them on
mhm,
Kindle because I like highlighting,
right.
and then my notes I can get
Mhm,
elsewhere.
mhm. Or you can
So,
print a specific page, yeah,
yes.
I did that. I actually did that with a page from your
Okay.
book. Mhm,
Yeah, exactly.
mhm,
And so that's that skunk work idea.
mhm,
So that same group, by the way, developed the Amazon tablets,
mhm,
Fire tablets. They
right.
also developed the Amazon Fire phone,
Mm,
which most people don't even remember,
right.
but
It was kinda
Amazon
like Google's phone and
kind of,
Facebook's phone.
yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it was
Mhm,
released in 2014
mhm,
to great fanfare,
mhm,
and it was an utter failure.
right.
Another example, by the way,
Mhm,
um, At one point, they reduced the price of the phone to 99 cents.
Oh.
And they still couldn't give
Mm-hmm.
away. And the last quarter of 2014, they wrote
Mm-hmm.
off $178 million in inventory that they couldn't move, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big failure.
Mm-hmm.
But where's the success? That same group, Lab
Mm-hmm.
126, took what they learned in the phone with voice
Mm-hmm.
and how to use that technology,
Mm-hmm.
and they also developed then the Amazon Echo.
Right.
And then the machine learning
Mm-hmm.
platform, what we know as Alexa, right? So we just kind of call it Alexa, but it's the hardware Echo and the AWS machine learning platform Alexa that have married together.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like it might be another one of their big bets.
Right.
So again, failure, yes, but what did it lead to?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they do have a little bit of a combination there.
Right.
So.
And of course, to me, one of the biggest successes is Amazon Prime. Initially I bought it because of the free shipping. I buy enough, my husband thinks I buy too much, but, I buy enough that the free shipping was definitely worth it. I forget what it was, and I got it probably the first year it came out. I went in my little head, I did the math. I thought, okay, that's like 8 purchases or something.
Right.
I mean, it really did pay for itself very quickly. And then when they went, ooh, let's add a streaming service.
Yes.
And I mean, and that was about the point where people really started having the cut the cord discussions. We're not going to have Comcast, DirecTV, whatever it is. We're just going to be online.
Right.
And then, of course, when they started developing their own programming, all-time favorite show of all time, Mrs. Maisel. I can't wait, Mrs. Maisel.
Just waiting for the next season, right?
I know. But the fact that they show old things, and their own programming, I mean, all of those things, that's a totally different type of because that's all obviously online.
Right.
And clearly not a physical product that they're selling.
So Prime is another example of a crazy idea that Bezos pushed, and senior management thought it was
right, because
they literally thought it was going to ruin the company when it started. And actually, the first couple years of Prime, it grew some, but it was slow.
Right.
But back to your point, when they added the video, then it started taking off because people got more value out of it in, certainly the shipping, which is what people think about, but there are over 35 different services now as a Prime member that you have access to, including now discounts at Whole Foods, for example. Right. So again, it's that interesting ecosystem for Amazon. But Prime, Bezos identifies 3 big bets that they've made: Marketplace, Prime, and then Amazon Web Services, the cloud platform. And he says in his, I think probably 2017 or 18 letter, we're working hard on finding a 4th big bet.
Right, because they have to continually innovate.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And that comes, let me pull up another of the principles. It's called Understand Your Flywheel. And I would say this one is the hardest to understand and implement, but probably the most important.
Right.
And brief story. So the concept of the flywheel comes from Jim Collins and his book, Good to Great, which was first published in October of 2001. And it's actually chapter 8 of the book. And there he describes what makes a company move from good to great. And he says it's the flywheel. And it's this idea of what are the inputs that you need to put in your business that will keep that flywheel and moving faster and faster to generate, in many cases, growth, let's say, or profits. Collins was invited by Bezos to come to Amazon to their senior leadership retreat and before the book came out and talk about the flywheel. And at that retreat, that team sketched out Amazon's flywheel. And for a long time, they called it the virtuous cycle. And And kind of back to what you said with Prime, that's part of their flywheel, meaning we need to get people to come to the website. If they come to the website and have a great experience, they're going to tell more people about it. More people that come to the website, the more leverage we have with manufacturers to get lower prices, so we can continue to lower prices. Add marketplace in there. Now we have third-party sellers, which gives a wider selection, and again brings more customers there. And so everything that Amazon does, even today, you can look at it as part of their flywheel, that they're continually adding new customers, giving new services, all part of that idea of continuing to grow.
Right.
So that's interesting to me. Again, like I said, hard to understand, and actually Colin says hard to implement, because you've got to execute it well. But one of the most important, and as I'm getting early feedback on the book, that's one of the interesting things that even small business owners are starting to go, hey, I've sketched out this flywheel. Here's where I think, and they're calling it, version 1. Because that actually is true. It could change over time.
Right, right. Yeah, another one of the things that Amazon does that I think is one of those brilliant flashes is their Smile program. And and obviously I use it. And it's for people who don't use it. Excuse me, why not?
Why not? It's free.
Because it doesn't cost you anything. And I think that's the important thing is, so in essence, there are many, many nonprofit entities. And if you are a nonprofit entity with your paperwork, all that good stuff, you can apply to be part of Amazon's program. And then for not every product, but for many products, a portion of that sale then goes back to that nonprofit. So, if I buy, say, a $10 book, I'm not spending 11 and making a donation. I'm spending 10. So it's the same cost as whether I'm part of the Smile program or not. But a portion then goes to an organization that I designate.
Correct.
And and I love that because it makes me feel good. I made a donation, but it didn't cost me any more.
Right.
Is it huge? I don't know. I've never actually looked at their overall numbers. I've talked to organizations who receive money that way, and they said, is it a big part of their budget? No. But for many, every little bit helps. And so the fact that you can do that is great.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example of, so first, it's a 0.5% of the purchase price is what gets donated.
Yeah, so a $10 book really isn't going to do very much.
It really isn't going to do very much, but how many hundreds or thousands of you are out there?
Right.
And that can add up, right? Again, it's not huge, but it can add up, and why not?
Right.
And what's interesting to me is, it's a very, I want to say, counterintuitive way of applying philanthropy, right, for an organization.
Right.
We'll let our customers designate where they want it to go. And there are thousands of nonprofits on there. You could find just about anybody, including a local elementary school, perhaps, that your kids are going to. And what a great way. And again, with Amazon, better for the customer, better for us. Yeah, we're and they've donated millions of dollars over I can't remember what year it was instituted.
Yeah, 5-ish years ago, maybe.
I think something like that. And they continually remind you, oh, you're not on the Smile site.
Yeah,
right.
It pops up and says, "Are you sure you don't want to be doing that?" And
oh
then
yes, I do. And and it's the exact same site. So why not? With Prime Day in July earlier this year, I was asked a couple times, okay, you have any tips for Prime, if people are shopping on Prime? And my tip was exactly this: make sure you're signed up for Smile, because if you're going to buy something, help somebody else.
Right. Right. And businesses can do that. That's the important thing that we always want to keep talking about here is the fact that any business can do the principles of Amazon. Now, can you do it to that degree? Obviously not. But we see businesses all the time that, as we're doing this is October, great example, Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So there are many businesses right now that will say a portion of their sales will go towards the American Cancer Society or, Komen Foundation or whatever. And is that an organization you want to donate to? Well, it's not a bad one. I mean,
Right.
they're not going to pick, for the most part, a controversial organization.
Hmm.
But it's a way that you can give back as the consumer, the business can give back. And so even if you're a small business, that's doing several $1,000s of sales a month, you can say to your customers, hey, I'm going to give 10%,
Right.
to whatever this nonprofit is. And so typically then it's something that's near and dear to the business owner's heart,
Absolutely.
or
Yep.
to, you maybe, polled your employees, things like that. But I think people really like that because we like to be philanthropic,
Hmm.
but it's just like the reason we like to go to Amazon. We need it to be easy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would agree with you. Any nonprofit that's not signed up on the SMILE program,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Right.
Why not, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why not?
Right.
Certainly if you're going to buy there anyway.
Right. So, as we mentioned, there are the 14 principles, and clearly we're not going to have enough time to go through all of those, and we don't want to because we want people to buy your book. But, I want to talk, we've only got, less than 10 minutes left. And so let's talk about the one that every single person, business owner absolutely should be doing. You should be doing all of them. But to me, it's the obsess over customers.
Hmm.
How are you going to make it so that your customers come back, spread the word, all of those various things? So, how has Amazon really figured out how to do that? We've talked a little bit about some of that, but let's talk about how any business can really be doing it.
And I think what's different here, I think every business knows they need to take care of customers. And
Hmm.
the terms they use typically are customer service,
Right.
customer focus,
Hmm.
customer experience, right,
Hmm.
customer journey. The word obsession, and that
Hmm.
is Bezos' words.
Hmm.
In fact, the 97 letter, the
Hmm.
original letter, he talks a lot about our
Hmm.
focus will be to obsess over customers.
Right.
And obsession can have some negative sides
Hmm.
to it, right?
Right.
Meaning
Hmm.
single focus, nothing else.
Hmm.
But at Amazon, everything they do goes through the lens of, is this better for the customer
Hmm.
and how?
Right.
And so I think that's what is different. And we mentioned earlier about marketplace sellers. If
Hmm.
they're not obsessing over their customers like
Hmm.
Amazon, that's
Hmm.
a problem.
Right.
And so a couple ways Amazon does that. First, um, they do have a customer service line.
Hmm.
Chat
Hmm.
often and you can call, and there
Hmm.
are some people there. But here's
I
how
talked to somebody last
I
week
know.
by doing that. And
Yeah.
the amazing, so I mentioned I was returning products,
Yeah.
and the option that I needed wasn't listed because it was a piece of clothing.
Ah,
So I
yes.
wasn't even sure I could return it. And so I clicked other or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it said, would you like a customer service representative to call you? Oh, sure. That sounds like fun. So I typed my number in and I hit return, and bam, I mean, like immediately my phone rang.
Uh-huh.
It was so fast that I thought it had to be somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And I answered the phone and she said, hello, this is so-and-so at Amazon. And I'm like,
Really? I didn't expect that.
I know. I mean, and it really was immediate. Now, that may have had to do with time of day, all those various things. So it might
Right.
not always be immediate, but
No.
it was fast.
But here's the point of that.
Hmm.
One, great experience, right?
Hmm.
Two, Amazon considers that a failure.
Right.
The fact that you had to
Yeah,
call
I had to talk to somebody. Hmm.
is a failure. And so what they have in the background, well, a couple things. One is self-service. You tried to do the self-service, but you couldn't because
Right.
it didn't have the option, I
Mhm.
think is the phrase you
Mhm.
use. So that may be an enhancement to the website.
Mhm.
Two is, can we automate that response?
Mhm.
Now, in your case, probably not, but in many cases, for example,
Mhm.
by the way, my book,
Oh,
I
yes.
bought my own book on Amazon,
Mhm.
and I shipped it, all of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And
Mhm.
then, I don't know, a couple of days later, I got an email saying, oh, the price had dropped. And so we're refunding $1.68.
Mhm.
Right. That for Amazon is
Mhm.
proactive
Mhm.
service and
Right.
automated
Mhm.
service.
Mhm.
So in your case, that may prompt, especially if there are multiple examples
Mhm.
of that, a change to the
Right.
website
Right.
option
Mhm.
so that you could take care of it yourself.
Right.
And I think when we talk about businesses, what are you doing to take friction out of how a customer deals with you.
Right.
In the insurance industry, most insurance agents think of, we want customers to call us. Amazon says we want the customer to get done what they need to get done
Right.
in as easy a way as possible.
If you
I think
prefer
that's a
to
different.
call, you can.
You
but,
can,
Mhm.
yes. And I think that's an example of that
Mhm.
customer obsession focus.
Right.
So yeah, I think it is key, and it is different than the
Mhm.
way many businesses
Mhm.
think.
Right. And it's interesting because one of the people that I read a lot is Bob Berg.
Mhm.
And, and Bob is obviously one of those people who talks a lot about, how you work with your customers and you provide them that value. And one of the things he says is, provide that extra value.
Mhm.
And one of the times when I was talking to him, I said, but isn't it going to be too, what if you go too far? And his point was, you don't want to be taken advantage of, and you're not giving everything away. You're just doing enough that it really is increasing that customer value, but you don't want to give it away. I mean, Amazon isn't going to, they still have obviously shareholders they have to
Right.
answer to,
Mhm.
and so they do enough and probably a couple steps beyond, but they don't go too far. And I
Mhm.
think that's, that's the example for all of us that we need to do is, what can we do to provide that extra value to keep people coming back without being taken advantage of?
No question. Yeah, and it's a delicate balancing
Mhm.
act there, how you do that.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely
Mhm.
agree with that.
Yeah.
And
It,
again, if it's better for the customer,
mhm.
it will be better for your
Right.
business long term.
Right. It's funny. I actually had this discussion with one of my customers today, brand new, just started working with her earlier this week. And she sent me an email last night at 9:30. Now, did I open it? Yes. Did I do anything? No, because
Mhm.
it didn't need taken
Right.
care of then.
Immediate. Yep.
Right. And so I responded to her this morning and I said, I typically don't open emails until after 6.
Mhm.
However, if you have an emergency and you need to reach me, here is what you do. And I learned that the very first year I started business
Oh
because
yeah.
people would say, well, you're there 24/7. Why can't you respond evenings, weekend, holidays?
Mhm.
And of course, my response was I'm more than happy to, but it will cost you.
Right.
you know? And
Oh,
they always go, all righty then, it can usually wait. Now, there are clearly emergencies, but,
absolutely.
that is kind of one of the things that maybe that Amazon has led to. I mean, it is a 24/7 type of business,
Mhm.
and if I want to go online shopping at 3, I can go online shopping at 3 in the morning or 3 p.m. But, as a small business owner, we can't do that. But it's about setting those expectations, telling people, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's when I'll respond. And if there's an issue, here's what you can do. Now, clearly it
Right.
depends on what your business is.
Correct.
But yeah, it is about, meeting their expectations without being walked on.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Great. Oh my gosh, Steve, we are almost out of time and we only discussed 2, 3 maybe.
Three
Well, actually, we just,
principles.
we
Well,
kind
we
of touched on all of them
touched on a
without
few.
really knowing
Yeah.
it. But this, it really is fascinating to me. And, and as we mentioned, any business can and should be, using these principles to grow your business, even if you're just making sure you're on the right track.
Right.
Look through these things. And so hold up your book, hold up your book.
Hold up the book. Here it is.
And I said it because I have the digital version,
Yeah.
And obviously you can get it on Amazon.
Yes, you can.
And so, but your website is the Bezos Letters. So, we encourage people to check that out. How else can they find and connect with you online?
Yeah, so the website, thebezosletters.com, and
Mhm.
actually there's some additional material there if you buy the
Okay.
book just to help you actually implement. So for me, ideas are great,
Mhm.
but implementation is key.
Right.
And then on most social platforms, my primary one is LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And so you should be able to search Steve Anderson
Mhm.
and find me. I'm fortunate to be a LinkedIn influencer, so usually my name pops up pretty quickly
Cool.
there. So love to connect with
Mhm.
anybody.
Mhm.
And yeah, the book's available
Mhm.
certainly on Amazon and on other platforms,
Mhm.
physical and online, wherever
Mhm.
you like buying your books.
Right. Well, Steve, we obviously have to continue this discussion. And I tell you what, if you ever actually talk to Jeff Bezos, we're stopping the presses. We're going to,
I would love to
yeah.
talk about that.
It is fascinating to see how a company that is just 25 years old.
Just 25 years old.
Right. Has become so incredibly successful. They've had their problems. They've had their issues.
Yep.
One of the things that we didn't talk about is, are they too big?
Yeah.
And which is an interesting discussion to have.
It is.
Is there a company that can be too big? Is it too influential, too much power? All of these various things. So, we'll just have to have that discussion for another day.
We can do that.
Well, are there any final thoughts you want to leave everyone with?
I a bit what I started out with, look at your own business and really ask the question, am I not taking enough risk in order to help me grow? And I think that as a foundation is a good starting point to think about your business and where it's headed over the next few years.
Right. And as you mentioned, probably the scariest one to have.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, I can't wait to do this again. But until next time, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely fascinating discussion with Steve Anderson, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer. Join us next time for more real-life stories and techniques to power up your business.
You've been listening to C-Suite Radio. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.